In this lesson, we'll open the existing model and discuss which views will be extracted. Now let's go ahead to our scene and we're going to open it, and it's in the scenes folder. So within your project files, 3D Max files, and then scenes, go ahead and open your first 3D Max begin file if you're following along with the project files. So this is the model as we had completed in the last course on speed modeling, and basically it's for those of you who don't know the project, it's an expo pavilion that is sitting on the Seine River in front of the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and it's basically a quite simple boxed object, but it has a lot of intricate details that we're going to want to look at as we export the plan sections and elevations. So the first couple of things that we can run through just as far as a checklist is concerned, have a look in your top view and just turn on your grid by hitting G on your keyboard and just get familiar with where your model is placed. At the moment, the 0 point has been placed on the bottom left-hand corner of the platform that the model is sitting on. So this corner right here where you see this little black X is where we have our 0, 0, 0 coordinate point. So even the top of this surface, which is actually supposed to be representing water, is in 0 in plan as well, or in the Z dimension as well. So if I just choose that coordinate, you can just double check those coordinates there. So now that you know where your model is, the other thing that you want to have a look at is what scale your model is in. So you can go ahead to unit setup and just make sure that you know what scale you're working in, so that once you do your importing process, that you do bring things at the right scale into AutoCAD further on down the line. So the next thing I'm going to look at in this section is just to have a look at your layers, the way that they're organized. Try to, as soon as you can, strip out as many layers as you can so that your model is as simple to work with as possible. For example, if you have any intricate models of cars, people, landscaping generally, try to get rid of all of those things, but keep in mind where that landscaping is supposed to be. If you have particular landscaped areas, like we have these areas here, if I can just point that out to you, these little spikes are meant to represent in a very conceptual way the tree objects that are going to be scattered on this top roof garden. So that's one of the things that you would want to keep in mind, but yet you don't want to necessarily export or transfer that information to AutoCAD. You would rather recreate it in an abstract way in AutoCAD, but just keeping in mind where it is. So let's go ahead now and run through the layer manager on our screen here, and the first thing I can do is go and delete any empty layers. So you can see that there's no plus sign next to those layers, so just select them and hit delete. And the next thing we can do is select all of the, for example, the people and the gardens. So we can select those two. Let's just isolate out that section. And it's always a good idea to have a look again at everything when it's isolated, just in case an object that you needed was actually on a layer that you're busy deleting. So here, I only want to delete the actual scattered object, which is this cylinder that has been tapered and scattered all around. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to then delete all of these people over there as well. I'm not going to delete this object because that is the one which is actually going to show me where those green planted areas are. So I need that information in there. So here again, once that layer is empty, I can go and delete it. And there's a couple more layers here that we can also get rid of. It's these two layers that we had in the previous course, which were showing our AutoCAD information for the areas and the source objects. So you can go and select those objects according to those layers, isolate that out, and if you're sure that you don't need anything within that, then you can go and delete that as well. So you can then also clear that up. So now you pretty much can run through this. You can even hide all of the layers for yourself, and you can just start looking at each of the objects individually so that you can get an idea what each of those exporting object that you are meant to be exporting looks like and what you need to do with it. So each of the objects, as you'll see throughout this course, is going to get exported slightly differently. For example, if we had this facade to work with. We have this very gentle undulating facade that is meant to look like a inflated pneumatic, very lightweight facade. Now you can't just go and take this dense geometry that you see over here and export it, because you'll never be able to understand what that geometry is if you export that as a facade. So we're going to look throughout this course at how we can pull these lines out so that it makes sense when we look at it as an elevation. So once you've gone through all of these different layers, you'll be able to then understand what components you're dealing with. So that's just a check that I recommend you do as soon as possible, so that you don't just go and do a single elevation or try to export everything in one go. It's not really the most effective way, even though you might think it is quicker. You're going to have a big headache if you want to try and just blast your way through and try and export the entire model and then squash it down into one elevation. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just discuss with you for a minute which plan sections and elevations we're going to do for this course. We're going to do one of each of the three. So in terms of a plan, the easiest one that we're going to do is the ground floor plan, the one that is showing all of these pedestrian walkways. And what we're going to want to show in that plan is a dashed line showing us where the pavilion is floating above this ground floor plan. So that's going to be part of that plan. We're going to want to show all of these paths, these little pavilions. We're going to show this bridge. We're going to show the riverbank, this building, in other words, the footprint of it. And we're then obviously going to show that outline of the pavilion above us. So that's going to be the first thing that we're going to do starting in the next lesson. The second drawing that we're going to extract is going to be an elevation and a section. So as far as a section, we're going to do a very similar section to the one that we did in the last course, where we're going to cut through the middle of this building and through the middle of this bridge. That's going to be one of the most interesting and informative sections because it shows that relationship between the ground, the entrance pavilion here, and as you walk along the bridge together with this entire central tower. And it's also going to show us what this space frame is doing and how the construction is working in the section of this facade. So that's going to be an important one. The last and third drawing that we're going to extract out of all of this is going to be an elevation. So the one that we're going to do is looking from this side, looking at the museum in the background. If we had chosen this elevation, we wouldn't necessarily see much of that background. So I think this will just create quite a nice backdrop because we do have that museum in the background to look at as well. So we're going to look at how we can do an elevation and represent not only what's happening in the foreground, but also show how we can draw an outline of this museum to be visible in the background of that elevation. So that's everything that we're going to cover in this course. It's going to be quite interesting, especially for those of you who model first and then do plans later. And let's now jump into the next lesson where we're going to start extracting information to create this ground floor plan for ourselves, and then we're going to move on to the other two drawings thereafter.